Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this episode of the Jason's Take On. Today, we're going to be talking about LowTouch and TechTouch customer success. So we're really excited to have you here, and thank you so much for joining us. This is the recording of our live podcast, so we don't have slides for this episode since it will be a podcast, but we hope you enjoy the conversation. We're going to target a max of 45 minutes, and we do encourage you as we're going through and as we're talking, please ask any questions that you have. You can just type them into the Q&A box, and we'll try to take all the questions at the end, but you don't have to wait to go ahead and go and share those. My name is Jason Whitehead, and I am the CEO and founder of TriTons. We are a customer success and user adoption consulting and training company based in Washington, D.C. I've been working in the space for about 20 plus years now, and I've had the great fortune to work with many wonderful medium and large-sized companies, really helping them map out their customer success programs and strategies, build their teams, and really help them improve adoption success within their customer base. So it's been great fun to do this over all these years, and it's been great fun to connect with so many of you on LinkedIn. So I do encourage you as well, if you've not joined the Jason's Take On LinkedIn group, please go ahead and sign up. And both Jason Noble and myself would love it if you would connect with us directly on LinkedIn. It's great to make those connections. So before we jump into the topic, I'd love to introduce my co-host, Jason Noble. Jason, you want to go and say a few words?
I do. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jason Noble. I'm the London, UK, European-based Jason of the Jason's Take On. Really good to be here. Jason and I were saying the other day that we're almost a year into doing the podcast for now, which is really exciting for us. We've got a number of really cool other conversations planned and some interviews with some great guest speakers, so do keep an eye out for those. Really excited to be here for this one. This one is a topic that I've spent a lot of time with many organizations talking about the pros, the cons of TechTouch, automated touch, and how you can do it. So really looking forward to that conversation. I'm currently the VP of Global Customer Success with a technology organization called Vinly. Vinly is an organization based in the US focused on technology around connected cars. So been with the organization coming up for 3 months now. Really exciting time. I've joined to build out the business here in Europe, but also build out their global customer success function. So really exciting time for me to join. I've spent, similar to Jason, similar background, probably about 20, 25 years working in different industry sectors, different organizations, basically helping businesses be more customer centric, which for me is that all accumulation about how we focus on customer success. I've worked as a customer success leader across a range of different organizations, both enterprise level and startup ones, more recently specializing in kind of technology startup organizations, either US based or European based. So really exciting time, really excited to be sharing some of the insights that I've had from my experiences with organizations and customers that I've worked for. As we've done in the previous podcast, we want to kind of give you all what we call a Be Bold challenge question here. So what's something you can do differently going forward? And our Be Bold challenge question for this month for you is, how can you revise your own customer segmentation model, in particular around your low touch and tech touch customers? What can you do differently? And how can you drive more value towards all of your customers and focus on the appropriate experience that they need and they want? So after the podcast, have a think about what you can do differently based on some of the insights that you've heard from us. We'd love to hear more about them. So as Jason said, please do share in our LinkedIn group. It's great to connect with so many of you. We've also got a Twitter group, but we're really wanting to make this a conversation that we have. So we're really keen to hear about what you guys have been doing. And what we're trying to do, 3 of the things that we will recap at the end that we want you to take away from this is how and why you can segment your customers for low touch and tech touch customer success services, the challenge around building effective low touch and tech touch services, and then also how you can take steps as your organization within your CS function there to help the organizations make sure that those efforts around tech touch and low touch are more impactful and can accelerate the customer success. And Jason, I think it's a great starting question to pose back to you. So how do you differentiate between so-called low touch and tech touch? What are the differences and what's a good definition of the two of them?
Yeah, I think people use the words interchangeably quite a bit, and it helps to just have a nice definition so we can make sure we're going through. But you know what, a lot of times when we think of tech touch, there's really no human touch at all. It's really just relying on automation to do everything. But there can be too much automation, and people say, oh, tech touch, it's a low-cost service model, and it's easy for to be the driver to, or low cost to serve and to increase customer value. So people tend to rush for that. But then there's also the whole idea is that, your customers, they don't want to know what tier they're in. They don't necessarily need to to know that they only get those pieces. And then low touch is sort of not relying on the technology to do all the actual contact for you, but sort of using it to provide some limited interaction. It still requires the human touch. So, typically you might have CSMs with a high number of accounts, and they might do some individual touches with them, but they may be trigger based of when they initiate some of the work and what that needs to look like. So it's a lot of differences there, but I think the low touch, is not just tech completely. And one of the challenges that I find though is that really with either approach here, you don't really build a relationship or trust with your customer, and that's really, I think, what so many people talk about is like, how do we build trusted relationships? How do we be proactive? And if you're just doing tech touch and just doing very low touch, it is very difficult to build a relationship and build trust. They might have a good individual experience, a good individual conversation, but a relationship really isn't there. So you need to be aware of that and try and figure out what are some of the things that you can do outside of that to really try and build those relationships. And just don't assume that customer X is going to get these approaches here. Understand that there's going to be some differences here. I think some organizations also sort of skip over some of the context around low touch and tech touch to really understand what's going to be best for them. And they say, oh, it's a cheap way to do this. It's scalable, but it's not necessarily effective, and it's not necessarily working with attention as much as we would like. So you need to be careful with low touch and tech touch, I think. But Jason, let me throw back to you then. So with that sort of a context, how, why, and when would you segment your customers with tech touch and low touch? What are some of your thoughts on that?
I think it's a great kind of segue into this, because it is a lot of people go into this to think, how do we bring down costs? How do we provide that great customer service, the drive of value and everything for our customers? But it's all about bringing down the cost, which is the wrong way to do it. And I think it absolutely isn't always appropriate to introduce tech touch and low touch models. For some customers, they absolutely want and pay for and expect the high touch approach. So you've got to really look at the kind of customers that you're geared at. I think if I look at some of the organizations I've worked with where you've got really enterprise level B2B customers, tech touch and low touch probably don't work as well for them. Organizations that do find them more effective, a lot of kind of B2C type services or lower end, lower price B2B services. But that's not to say that we don't have customers who don't necessarily warrant that same intensive human level of engagement. I think you need to be a judge of that in part of the sales process. The engagement you do with the customers as part of the pre-sales process is understand what level of engagement and interaction they want and what the value is they're getting from it. You find that some customers that are more tech savvy are quite happy with the idea of self-service. You've got to look at who the customers are. There are some that on the opposite side that don't like technology so much. They're more about the relationship, that they want to speak to somebody. So you need to understand where the benefits are and who's better aligned to using TechTouch, and really help your customers to help themselves here, whether it's through self-service or through relationships. And I've seen models work with the same customer base where we tried a more generic low touch approach and had a shared mailbox, for example, for multiple customers with people on a rota going into that. And it just didn't work. The customers, although ultimately you gave them that same service, they were getting the same outcomes, they were missing that relationship. So even though the level of interaction they wanted actually fell in at the low touch level, they still wanted that named contact. So you need to get an understanding of what customers are looking for. But it isn't always about how much your customers are willing to pay for it. It really is about their preferred model of working with partners and how it can grow and scale with them. And that's the balance you've got to do, because you can't, what we're not saying here is put a CSM dedicated to every single customer, on a 1 to a small number relationship. There are some CSMs that do 1 to 50, 60, 70, 80 plus customers. You've got to understand what sort of level of interaction you need. And as part of that, I think generate the right level of customer journey for those engagements. I think understanding the modeling and segmentation you've got here around these low touch and tech touch customers really helps you scale your customer success operations. And it's great for those small long tail customers, but it really is only a value add if your approach is effective and has the impact that your customers want. So really don't do this as a checkbox exercise to say, yes, we've got customer success, we're just going to give everyone low touch and self-service. You can't do that. That will absolutely fail. You've got to look at what do our customers want? So that's part of the outcomes and what you see that they want there. And I think you've got to look at kind of most organizations, when you go into segmentation, you default on a segmentation model based on revenue or annual recurring revenue, but you don't pay attention to how that ties up to the experience levels that your customers want. So you've really got to think differently about this. You know, a customer that's paying certain amounts of money, the experience they want can be very different to what other people paying the same amount of money are. So don't segment just on your revenue. Really look at the so-called appropriate experience and think differently about it. I think a number of organizations, sorry, Jess, I was going to say a number of organizations I've worked with, the segmentation models come from sales to help them target customers better. But as you mature and we want our customers to be more successful, you've got to start thinking about it more from a customer success point of view, not just sales. Sorry, Jason, you were saying.
No, that's so true. And I think that's a really important thing. And that reminds me, you've talked a lot about, sort of tech-enabled touch approach, which I'd love to hear more about that. So I guess sort of in that context, how can you make low touch and tech touch as effective as medium and high touch? And do you think you can you even make it as effective?
Yeah, I think you can. And I think that's the big challenge, is how you make it effective. And I think you've got to really ask yourself what makes your high and medium touch approaches good. What works with them, and how do you bring that into the technology side? How do you bring it in and automate parts of it? I think for me, tech touch is more about, I don't like the term tech touch. It implies that there is no human interaction. For me, it's about a more tech triggered or tech enabled approach, where you bring in technology, we bring in the human, at the right points, where you've got a trigger in the customer journey that says, right, this is what you need to happen. There's a call to action. You need to speak to this person. But it provides automation and efficiency around the right levels of the service, but you're still bringing in the CSM, the human, for that relationship at the right point. So really look at what works really well with your more intensive services around your high touch and medium touch, and bring those into the automated piece. And I think you've got to look at what parts of the model can you automate, can you scale. It doesn't make sense to automate all of it. This goes back to that whole idea that document your customer journey, document it per segment, really work out what it looks like, look at it from a customer point of view, but do it per segment. Don't just do one customer journey for everybody. Your customer journey for your high touch customers is very different for your low touch. And that, I think, is one of the critical differences. And let's try and think also about this blended approach. As I said, I like to think of it as this tech-enabled approach, where you use technology to really drive automation and efficiency, but you still have the human there. So it really, for me, I know Gainsight have always talked about the idea of shifting from being reactive, as we always start in customer success, going through to proactive, to predictive. And this helps us go along that model. You still need to bring in technology to allow those certain drivers there. And I think you can really, the automation from a vendor point of view really does allow for cost reductions, efficiencies, but don't do it just for that. You've got to really understand what the customers want, and use technology to monitor and look after your customers, look how your customers are using your product, and really prompt your CSMs to come in at the right points in the journey. So it really tells you that technology is being used, but what it's being used for. I think that's the key thing. I think that brings me on to a really neat question for you, Jason. I appreciate I've kind of gone on a little bit here, but how do you effectively communicate with larger numbers of customers? I talked a little bit about those higher ratios of CSM to number of customers, but how do you manage and communicate with larger numbers of customers well?
I love that question, because I think this is an area where most people, they're not going bold enough. And I think people have sort of gotten into the habit of, oh, well, we need to do emails, and we can do email blasts, and we can trigger emails. We can do in-app messaging, very much that whole push mentality, but it's still very much one-to-one, it's kind of pushing out to a single person, where I think many organizations miss a real trick, that they don't think enough about sort of a one-to-many idea, and sort of, how do we involve a whole group of people and do sort of high volume touch kind of thing. So some simple examples of that, as you're thinking through the journey for your customers, where can you actually do more like of a cohort style piece? Where can you do, here's a training of multiple customers that kicks off a process going forward. How do we do very targeted group meetings and live meetings and webinars and those kind of things around specific topics, where there's live people can ask questions, you can have that personal touch when you're going through, but it is touching a large number of your customers all at once. And through those interactions, I think you can really get some ways to build up relationships and build up trust between the people that are delivering the information and engaging with your customers in a group setting. But, it can be, tool mediated. So again, your webinars, landing pages, all the other good stuff, even videos. But it's not just pushing messages out. It's having the way to have that conversation. And I personally find that, like this blended approach where some of your touches are human touch, some are automated based on technology, some may be video, some may be other pieces, can really do a lot to build that relationship. And what I've experienced firsthand here is, we do a lot of webinars, speaking events, we do a lot of, the podcast, obviously, we have the blog, all these things together. As people attend multiple events and they get to, even though we're not speaking directly with them, they are building up a relationship with us, they are building up trust with us, and it's really having an impact. So many times we've had people who've attended multiple webinars or podcasts, and then they'll say, okay, we have a problem, I think I understand what TriTouch does. We'll give them a call, and we'll have a much easier conversation then, because they already feel that there's some credibility and some trust that's going on there. And I think a lot of organizations really miss the opportunity about that. So when you think about all this stuff, looking at the high volume touch, think from your customer's perspective. Are they getting multiple touches that are actually help building a relationship and not just sharing information and not just pushing them to try and do something? Are you building credibility so that the end-to-end journey of low touch and high touch and group touch and all those pieces really build up the relationship that you want? No single piece can do it all, but all together you can do it quite effectively, I think. So those are just some of my thoughts on that. Jason, let me, as we're talking about this, let me turn back to you. What are some of the challenges with all these different approaches? What do you see are some of the big things people need to watch out for?
I think, your point there, Jason, is just one of the key things. That communication effectively with large numbers of customers is a really, really big challenge. And I love some of the ideas you've given there, because it's something that many organizations have struggled with. I think it's a lot easier to communicate one-on-one to a small number, but that one-to-many is a huge challenge in how you do it effectively. So I think you've covered one of the biggest challenges there. But I think one of the other things is what do you or should you tell your customers anything about segmentation? And what do you tell your customers? And my view is no, you shouldn't. I think you don't talk about kind of the service they're getting or the lack of service. And you don't want your customers categorically to know they're on a so-called low touch or tech touch model. So segmentation really isn't something that you talk to your customers about. And I think you've got to be very, very careful of that, because I've seen customer success groups work where the team's segmented by their segments as well. So you've got a team focused on your high-end customers, you've got teams focused on kind of the middle touch, and you've got some focused on those lower touch ones with that one-to-many relationships. But you don't want your customers to know that there are these different teams, because that gives across the wrong message completely. Your teams want to know that they've got a person, a service from you that's being delivered on. So that messaging around it is really, really critical. I think the other thing you've got to look at is how does what you're doing and the services you're providing in terms of segmentation fit with competitive customer success services and part of your sales process. So this is actually it's one of the podcasts that we're going to do in September, Jason, if you remember. It's
right.
a really, really exciting one that I'm looking forward to talking about. But there's a number of big challenges there. How do you can you use customer success to differentiate yourself from your competitors? Yes, you can. But at the same time, you've also got to be conscious that our customers have got multiple vendors that they're dealing with as part of their whole value chain. And how do they interact with more and more customer success teams and managers who are working across different parts of the organization? And that's something you've got to balance, because we're potentially asking for more and more of our customers' time. And I think that's going to be a bigger and bigger challenge as customer success matures. So really being conscious of our customers' time and the value that they want from us, which goes back to the earlier point about what's the engagement our customers want from us, and how are we best suited to providing that? So do our customers like email? Do they want video calls, to your point, Jace? Do they want mass mail communications? Do they want technology? You really need to understand that. And clearly every customer is different within bounds, but it will give you an idea of what levels of service you can do. And I think that's really important to understand that, but also understand with your sales team, how are they positioning customer success? Are they positioning it as this heavy, intensive, people-intensive service? I use the word heavy in a nice way there, not a negative way. Or are they positioning it as a low touch, all technology driven? Excuse the noise. I do live under the flight path at Heathrow, so if you can hear the airplanes flying over, it is indeed airplanes flying over where I am right now. And I think the other thing you've got to look at when when customers change, if a customer changes the amount of service that they're using from you, either up or down, do you change the segment they're going in, and how do you realign the service levels? And that again is a big challenge. So if a customer's used to receiving a certain level of service from you, and it's going well and they're getting the value they want, but for external factors that we might not have been aware of, and yes, you could argue that we should have been aware of them, but put that to one side for now. But if they downgraded their service, and that just might be in terms of the value they're getting from us, or the services and options they're getting from us, they're still expecting a certain level of service. How do you manage expectations? How do you effectively transition that customer from that better level of service, and I use the word better in inverted commas, to a low touch or tech touch approach? I think you've got to be very conscious about that. Because again, I've seen with a number of organizations where that does happen. Customers do downgrade for whatever reasons, but their expectation is to get the same service. Now, my stance on that is that you have to be very, very transparent with the customer, that they are now, what they're getting from you doesn't warrant this level of dedication and resource. But going back to the customer journeys, you need to have defined what they will get. So it's very clear to them what they're getting instead now. And I think having that documentation available is really critical to do that. And that transition is something that I've seen multiple times there. And it does, if you don't do it right, it can absolutely impact the customer health. So it's really important to get it right, but very challenging to do. And I think your customers, the other thing I'd say is that your customers need to know that you're providing them with a level of service and experience that they want and need. And you need to be able to show them that they can get that and continue to get that and continue to get the value. So irrespective of the segment they're in, whether it's high touch, medium touch, low touch, tech touch, really start showing them what it is that they're getting from you. I don't know, were there any other challenges that you've come across, Jason, in the experiences that you've worked with?
I think we've covered a lot of them right there. I think there's also the challenge that people invest a lot of energy into building out, automated tech touch materials, and they fall flat. People, they don't open the emails, or the messaging that they're trying to push out there really doesn't move the experience forward and doesn't solve the customer's problem. It's more of a marketing type message as opposed to a success message, and it hasn't really gone through. How are we helping to build our customers' capacity to solve their own problems? How do we help them go forward? So, you can, as you mentioned earlier, the check the box mentality. Yes, we can say we have this. Yes, we can say we've touched them. Yes, we've triggered off the email, but it may not be effective and it may not have the impact. So I think there's a lot of things around that, and I'm sure, there's probably plenty more that you can go through all the way, but it's not a silver bullet that's going to solve all of your problems. I think many people just assume that we can do it in mass, so it's got to be better.
I think you're so right there, and it is that you need to make sure the communications are working for those audiences. And a lot of this is about this idea about customer communications. It is one of the key things. There's another podcast that we'll do about customer marketing. It's not about lead generation. It's about marketing the right message to our customers. So there's a lot we can do to make sure that's going there. I'll kind of put the next question over to you, Jason, kind of following on from that. But how do you ensure that your customers in these segments, so in this low touch, tech touch, how do you ensure that we don't forget about them? And how do you ensure that we service this so-called long tail of customers? Because it is a big challenge and you don't want them to be forgotten about. How do you make sure that we service them properly?
It is a challenge because you've got the 80-20 rule and all that good stuff, but they can be such a great source of revenue, especially in mass. They may have smaller revenue around them, but when you put them all together, like that's a significant portion of income for your organization, and as well as the significant portion of customers that may be your future large customers, and making sure you have that going. So, making sure, as we talked about, having that clear segmentation model and that we know where each customer fits, it's really critical, and making sure that we also have a path for how those segmentations need to be in place and how they need to advance. And are we doing our best to, while they may be low touch now, to try and move them along the spectrum, that they're growing with us, that they're having that positive experience, that they're also giving great reputation for us, and being advocates for us. I think there's a lot there. And then also, what are those right levels of technology and automation and human interactions? How do you find that right blend is a challenge. But making sure that all of it is geared towards building a trusted relationship and not just pushing out information, I think is pretty critical. And I think a lot of folks struggle with that. So those are just a couple of my ideas. What are your thoughts on some other ways to ensure customers in this segment are not forgotten about?
Yeah, I think it is a big challenge, and I appreciate that we've said quite a lot in this podcast that things are a big challenge looking after these ones. But it is, you you quite often have a higher volume of customers, and sometimes a much, much higher volume of customers. I've been in organizations where you had 10, 20, 30 times as many customers in these segments. And I think one of the really key things for me is always to have metrics or key performance indicators that you can really track and report on, that to tell you how these customers are doing, how are they using our product, how are they getting the engagement from it. So whether it's in product engagement, metrics, statistics, usage data there, but looking around that experience, how are they actually using it, and what the risks are as well. So when they don't do certain things within the product, when they don't do certain things within the customer journey, identify that and make that very transparent. I think that's where the benefit of the likes of a customer success management platform can really help and automate that. So I think that's one of the really big key things. I think there are absolutely a number of organizations, external organizations, that can provide outsourced customer success services. And that number of customers is growing both in the US and in Europe. I know of a few organizations and some good friends that do that. And that really, it can really drive, it's outsourcing, but not outsourcing. You're outsourcing just to get the right drive of value for there, but it isn't outsourcing just from the point of view of cost. And I've seen multiple times when outsourcing the idea of customer service can go wrong, but these new models for outsourcing customer success are very different. And it is about giving somebody a dedicated contact point, a dedicated relationship, but being able to do it at scale that you and your organization might not be able to do it. So typically it's with organizations that have capability to scale up very fast, to scale down very quickly, and it gives you kind of a really nice flexible model. So that's something that I think is really good to look at. I think, as I said earlier on, the other thing you can do is have a specific team dedicated to those customers with very well-defined processes and tools. I'm such not a fan of scripted approaches, but have a more scripted approach for dealing with them. And I think you always need to be able to go off script, but having kind of a more standard steer as to what the conversations are, what the issues are, really helps you do that. I think the other thing I've seen with teams there is you can have a dedicated team, but also have a team on a rota. So it gives your team, your CSMs coming in, great experience as to how to start working with sometimes challenging customers, understanding your processes, but put them on a rota, have other people coming back in there, and have these people that have been dealing with those TechTouch customers then move on to bigger customers. And I think something that I've seen great success from in a number of organizations, most recently when I was at organization Goodlord in London, is we had new starters in customer success. So new starters in our team joined the team in the segment looking after the more TechTouch accounts. Now, yes, you need the right level of leadership of coaching there, but similar to kind of an outsourced model, it really helps. It's a great training ground, a proving ground. And if you've got the right mechanics, tools, and scripts to kind of bring it up to where you need it to be, it can really help focus on those customers and give them that level of love and attention they need.
Yeah, and I think that's so important because we've recently done some work with an organization that obviously has, low, medium, and high touch customers and a very large team. And we've built out a playbook for them in training. And the first, several sections of the playbook were fundamental concepts of customer success and how the experience you want to have your customer, how to be proactive, and how to really be direct with them as a way to help the customer be more successful. And the first part of it was all about building up the knowledge base of customer success managers so that they can apply their best judgment. I think you really hit the nail on the head with you don't want to be so overly scripted that there's no room for them to move. You're hiring smart people, you're trying to give them the vision for what it needs to look like. And then the next piece that we did with it is really mapped out in detail what's the high touch experience supposed to be, knowing that it doesn't apply to everyone, but so that everyone really could understand, here are the concepts, here's how this works in the high touch piece. And then we're going to work from there to sort of simplify it for the less complex customers. But everyone knows as customers upgrade and as they move up that path, here's what the ultimate experience will be for them. So let's make sure that we figure out how we get people moving towards that direction as they're growing. So I think that's been pretty successful for us as well too. Yeah. Jason, I see we've got several questions here, and thank you for everyone who is asking. If you have more, please go ahead and type them in. So I'll start out question for you, Jason. We have in here is, in some CS programs, high touch customers pay for dedicated CSM, while the low touch customers do not pay for the service. How do we help these customers achieve their business objectives?
It's a really cool question, that, and I know whether you pay for customer success as a separate service or not, is a topic of great debate. And I was having a conversation last night out for drinks by the river in Richmond, a lovely sunny London evening. But we were talking about exactly this and whether you do you charge for customer success or not. But I think that the key point here is how do you, both of these, whether you pay for it or not, and whether it's high touch or low touch, customer success is there to drive the value and outcome. It's not you pay for it and you get more outcomes. You need to understand what those outcomes are, irrespective of the segment you're in, or more particularly aligned to the segment you're in. When your customers come across from sales, understand those outcomes and the value that they want as part of your sales process. Make sure you within customer success can capture them, and then you've got the right customer journey, as we talked about earlier on, that allows you then to present the value and objectives back to them in the manner and experience level that's appropriate for that customer. So I think it's almost irrelevant whether there is a model, whether they pay for it or not. CS is there to drive value and help the customers achieve their business objectives. What I'd always look at doing, if you're finding that there are challenges where perhaps your low touch, tech touch customers are not achieving objectives to the same level, revisit your customer journey and have a look at maybe segmenting your customer journey better so that you know for your low touch customers, how do you drive automation to help them achieve those objectives better? And it's a great question. Jason, I'm going to give one of the next questions to you, which is a really good one here. What do you do if you've got a tech touch customer that's got low potential for growth? So there's a small, very low opportunity growth from as well. What do you do when they request kind of more engagement with you on a face-to-face basis? How do you interact with them? Do you stick with technology-driven or contact there, or do you find some sort of middle ground? As we said, kind of a blended approach. What's some examples that you've got?
I think that's a challenging one because everyone, if you have a low touch and tech touch customer, especially with low potential growth, I mean, that really, you probably have a volume issue too, and your CSMs are probably under a lot of work restraints with them. I think if the policy is such that what they're asking for really is like a support type question, politely funneling them into the support queue and just explain where to handle. But I also think if you have the capacity in the room, on a limited basis, you can take a single call or initial call to try and build a relationship with that customer. We've had cases here where I've been put in touch with someone for a networking call from a contact. They had questions. We're always happy to do a free consult with folks. Get on the phone with them, have a nice conversation, explained a little bit about what we do, answered some of their questions, and thought that would be the end of it. Within a week, the person came back and booked some of our time online and paid with their credit card, just got on with it. And that has led to several follow-on individual coaching calls, all because I took the time to say, hey, let me see if I can help and pay it forward. And then they came right back to me, and it was just a great experience. So I think there may be times like that, and say, low potential growth, and that may be the case this time, but you don't know who they might refer back into you later. You don't know what they might do to advocate for you. So if you have the capacity, and you don't do this every single time, you can say, hey, we like to give every customer, one free consult a year, one free consult, a quarter, whatever it may be, and just sort of track that it's there. So they don't get the expectation that they can go around the piece, but also be firm and just say, would love to be able to help you more. I do have other constraints on my time. If you would like more service, here's how you can get it. And make sure there's an easy channel where if people want to pay by the hour for a quick call, if they have that option without having to make a big commitment. So I think that's been effective with a lot of organizations. So that's my thought on that. Jason, here's a question for you. How do you recommend having customers convey their service experience preferences if it's not based on revenue? You mentioned it could be conveyed on the sales side. What are some other processes you've seen to be effective?
Great question. Let me have a think about that. I think you do need that. Getting the engagement at the sales side is critical. So as we've kind of advocated before, I think for the right level of customer, you bring in customer success in the pre-sales process to help kind of close those bigger deals. I guess the flip side here is if we're talking about low touch, tech touch customers, how do you understand what level of service and interaction they want? But I'd also say on the sales side, there may be more automated sales that are coming through. These may be kind of just done through a website. There may be simple engagements you've done. There may not be extensive sales processes, but you should still know from a CS point of view where the sales have come from, how they've been captured, what the customer's expectations are. You can put some questions out there either through your business development representatives, through your sales development team, or automate it if it's an automated sale. I think it's critical to capture that there. And I think the risk of not doing it is that you engage with a customer as a CSM team, CSM leader, and not knowing what their level of experience required is. That the default quite often for customers was always to get the very best that they could be or could have. And that by its very nature might translate to a dedicated person helping them when they want. So you need that engagement as part of your sales process to understand what they're coming through. So not just based about revenue, but actually ask the question to the customer. What level of experience works for them? Are they tech savvy? Do they interact well with self-service? Do you get an idea of what other services and tools that they have? I think a lot of it comes through questioning, but just to understand more about what the customers want. It's a great question. It really is. And I think there's a big bit to be done about the sales process, revenue, but also level of experience that the customers want. But then also work with the customers to understand what can be done through the product. Mm-hmm. You know, how do I use the product drive more around success? There's a whole idea about product-led customer success now, and actually technology-led customer success, tech-enabled, low touch. If my product's doing its job well and it's interacting and providing the right outcomes through the product, that allows me to do it. So how do I get my product team to interact better with my customers? And I bring them in as well. What engagement interviews can I do with the product team there? Another question here, Jason. We're getting lots of questions coming in, which is fantastic. Have you seen any generational differences impact when you plan for low versus high touch interaction? Very, very interesting. And in addition to the segmentation, the need to manage costs and reasons for designing kind of low versus high touch, have you seen any differences in terms of customer demographics, millennials and post-millennials that prefer that technology interaction or actually prefer to speak to people? Brilliant question, that one.
I think that is a great question. I personally have not come across that in any great detail yet. Anecdotally, you know, I can definitely see where millennials that I've experienced prefer the, you know, let me jump on my phone and mobile friendly, do what I need to do. Let me do a live chat kind of piece. They're less likely to pick up the phone when I actually speak to someone in my experience. But I haven't seen a ton of folks where it's been, or a ton of customers where it's been mapped out that way based on their generational differences in their age, but more just sort of what's the channel by which they want to come through us, and the assumption that anyone would want to filter in through there. But I think that's an interesting way. That'd be nice if you, as you're going through and researching your customers, to try and map out not just what the customer organization is, but if you look at the demographics of the individual, maybe design for different channels through that as well too. I think that's a great idea, and lots of organizations do that. Jason, have you had any experience with that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about it, and I not so much customers, but I think if you look at just kind of how I interact with it, I see how my kids, my oldest daughter's 13, but how she interacts with technology, and I can absolutely see there being kind of a generational change there. And I think if my kind of stance would be, if the technology works, then the need for that human interaction isn't there. So if the product does what I want it to do, if I'm getting that engagement and value from the product, if I can also get the success, but if I can also get the support that I want from the product and can get that automated, I think there's less of a need to. And I think what we perhaps are seeing is that the default interaction that kind of the next generation, if you want to speak of it like that, are using would be technology. And then they'd revert back to the human one later. Whereas I think you'd still see other people going the kind of the other generation. You know, I'm not a millennial by any stretch of the imagination, but for me, I'd always default to the human side of it if the technology side didn't work. Whereas I think a millennial might push on the technology side a little bit more and persevere with it a little bit more. Fascinating question.
It is. Thank you so much for that one. So one for you, Jason. When managing customers in a one-to-many format, think high volume of SMB customers with a single CSM, what are some of the successful ways you recommend determining cohort preferences? You mentioned that some customers prefer high touch, some low touch, and some tech touch, but how do you reach all of them effectively to understand what the majority prefers? You know, email blasts are one option, but don't always drive full engagement. What other methods have you seen?
I think, I mean, you talked about this earlier on, Jason, the point you made about kind of effectively communicating with larger customers. So I think you've got to kind of try something different. Look at kind of workshops, webinars, landing pages. I think you also talked about email drip campaigns that come in. So not just email blasts, but campaigns. There are ideas of videos. You can look at kind of chat mechanisms there. So really it's trying to get that blended approach really well there. And I think it's finding the right balance there. So I think you've covered a lot of that off already, Jason. I think what we will do on that question, if it still is a point to talk through, is let's post something in the LinkedIn group. Would be a great thing to kind of follow up on it. I think another question here's for you, Jason. How do you ensure customer success, this is a great one, doesn't become technical support? And you see this particularly sometimes in kind of SaaS-based technology organizations. How do you help your customers understand what success is, whether it's high touch, low touch, but how do you make sure it's differentiated from what support is?
Yeah, I think that that's such a challenge that most organizations are struggling with. And I would even say it has to start even during the sales process, and even in the marketing positioning of your customer success team. And this is something I think we'll definitely come back to even during the discussion, I think it's September, of competitive CS services. Setting the expectation that customer success, is a professional practice, and you're here to help the customer achieve business outcomes, not technical outcomes. You're here to help them achieve business results that they've been unable to achieve with their own. And when I look at the whole reason of our customer success teams is, if you look at it, before the subscription business model, when you had perpetual license and on-prem, or even homegrown systems, someone invested in this right up front, and if they didn't get value from it, they were stuck with it. It's only when the business model changed that they realized, oh, people are really good at getting systems live, but they really struggle to get business value out of them. So now as a software vendor, we have a vested interest in ensuring they do so that they renew and subscribe. So helping set those expectations of, here's how we do this. Here's how we add value to the organization that you can't achieve on your own via the customer success team. And by the way, here's what technical support is, and here's where that fits in. And that there may be, overlaps between us in the sense that we may report to the same executive. We may be part of a post-sales team, but here's when you need to contact the support team for these types of questions. Here's where we work with you and how we work with you from a success perspective. Getting that really clear with folks. And if they come to you with the wrong type of question, being comfortable saying, look, I'm happy to help you get the right answer for that, but I'm not the best person to answer that question. I'm going to connect you with your support team. And for future questions like this, you're probably going to be better off going to them directly. Here's when you should come to me directly first, and just constantly reinforcing that to your customer. So I think that definitely helps a lot as well too. So I think that's sort of where we are. We do have one question here, Jason, for you, and is, what is your experience in attendance in live webinars? Is it even worth it if you only have 5 or 6 attendees? We have very low registration. Is it worth it?
I see. It's a good question. Something that we've talked about a lot, Jason. I think the answer is yes. We always do it. For us, we love doing these live. We love people listening in, but it's not about the numbers. These are available offline as well as podcasts. It's about the conversation. The other ones we do them offline where there's people not listening in. The interviews, because it does require a bit of editing sometimes on those. But this is, for you and I, Jason, we've said from the beginning, this is about a conversation that we're having and people listening in, getting some insights. And I love the fact this month that we've had so many questions. And actually, I think this is our record number of registrations and record number of listeners, which is fantastic. So we're really thankful and lucky that our numbers have grown and grown. But I think for us, if we only get 5 to 6 attendees, absolutely, it's worth it. If we've got 5 to 6 people, it can be a more intimate conversation. We'd hope to get a lot more questions that come in there.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and I think there's value in doing the live ones, getting comfortable with it as a presenter, getting comfortable with the subject matter. And if you're recording those, using the material as evergreen content if you can to slice and dice it for other uses. One company that I've come across, I think, does a brilliant job. If you haven't seen it, leadpages.net, they have a landing page system that we use, and it's great. And what I really enjoy about it is they have a whole host of recorded webinars and trainings that not only show you how to navigate their application, but they provide subject matter expertise on either end of it. So here's how you solve a business problem, and then here's how the one piece that you use within the application, but here's some tools to help you outside of that as well too. And that end-to-end process feels like you've built your own capacity to solve a business problem. And because they show you how the tool fits in with that and how easy it is, like, oh, okay, now this makes sense for using the tool in the context of the work that I'm trying to achieve and the outcome I'm trying to achieve. And a lot of those they have recorded live and sliced and diced and put it into a format that's really usable. And I highly recommend people check that out as a very good model and go ahead and try it for yourself. So I'm a big fan of whenever you can, do it live and make that connection, especially even like we've seen here, we've had several questions come in and being able to get people to, share their ideas is great. And again, that site that I was talking about is leadpages.net. And if you also go to their YouTube channel, they have some links in there to some of their training videos that they've rebundled in that also have a landing page with checklists and other stuff. And I'll go through and try and dig up the resource and put it in the Jason's Take On LinkedIn group. So if you haven't joined the group yet, go ahead and do that, and I'll put the resource out there in the next day or two. So I think that's where we are for questions today. So thank you all so much. Before we go, just to recap here, our big challenge question, our Be Bold question for this month is, how can you revise your own customer segmentation model, in particular around LowTouch and TechTouch, to drive more value for your customers, and really focus more on the appropriate experience that they want to have. So really, how can you apply some of these ideas? How can you get creative around that to really update and change your segmentation model and how you engage in LowTouch and TechTouch, and hopefully one-to-many group touch? And also, the top 3 things we're hoping we would cover today: why and how to segment your customers for LowTouch and TechTouch customer success services. Number 2, what are some of the challenges of building effective LowTouch and TechTouch models? And then number 3, what are some steps you can take to ensure your LowTouch and TechTouch efforts are impactful and accelerate customer success? So that's what we tried to cover today. Really hope you have found this useful. We appreciate all the questions and joining in. And if you enjoy this session, please go ahead and share this with others as well too. And we hope to see you on August 13th. We will be talking about customer success expertise versus domain expertise. What do you need more in your team? And we know that some industries, people say, oh, you must have worked in the industry, you must know this about it. And others say, no, we need really highly experienced customer success practitioners with CS skills. We're going to be taking on that topic in our next episode. So from me, Jason Whitehead here, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed the conversation and hope you'll come and join us again too. Jason, you want to say any last words?
Yeah, guys, thank you so much. Loved all of the questions. Fantastic. I think we've had kind of a big number of attendees, listeners, and questions, which is fantastic. There are some questions that we didn't manage to answer, so please do feel free to post them in the LinkedIn group. We will do our best to answer them there. We appreciate it. It's kind of the summer holidays coming up, which is, for me, I've had to shift the next August one forward a week because I've got my summer holiday coming up, but we would love people to join in on those and listen. And as Jason said, the next topic is something that I've seen a lot of in kind of conversations where I've been speaking to people about organizations, about customer success roles. So really excited about that. But as Jason said, thank you, everybody. Really excited about this. Really enjoyed the conversation. And please, if you've enjoyed it, do tell other people about this. We hope to speak to you next time.
Great. Thank you so much.